The force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and life. But in the deepest oceans of Cala, where light dies and pressure crushes durasteel, there exists something older, a darkness not of the Sith, but of the primal deep itself. The desolate abyss had claimed countless explorers over millennia, its secrets guarded by creatures that predated the Republic itself. On this day, those waters would surrender something they had never possessed, a king from another universe entirely. The rift opened without warning. One moment, Arthur Curry was fighting for his life in Earth's Mariana Trench, the ancient Atlantean doomsday weapon collapsing around him in a maelstrom of impossible energies. The next, he was tumbling through a tunnel of fractured light and crushing void, his body screaming as dimensional barriers tore at his consciousness. The trident of Poseidon blazed in his grip, its mystical energies the only anchor, preventing his complete dissolution across realities. Then water. Alien water, but water nonetheless. Aquaman's Atlantean physiology adapted instantly, gills processing the unfamiliar, salinity as his eyes adjusted to bioluminescent organisms he'd never seen before. The ocean pressed against him with familiar comfort, though everything else screamed wrongness. Above, twin moons cast pale light through hundreds of feet of water. Around him, coral formations grew in geometric patterns that defied Earth's natural chaos. And beneath him, the trench continued downward into absolute darkness, radiating a pull that felt almost aware. Where am I? He reached out with his telepathy, the gift that had let him command Earth's oceans since birth. The response nearly shattered his mind. Consciousness exploded. Against his senses, not the simple biological imperatives of fish and whales, but something far more complex. These creatures thought in ways Earth's marine life never had. Curiosity, fear, recognition, wonder. The telepathic chorus was overwhelming, a symphony of alien minds that spoke in feelings and images rather than words. A massive shape moved in the darkness below. Aquaman's combat instincts, flared as something vast and ancient, rose toward him, a leviathan, easily 200 feet long, its body covered in crystalline scales that pulsed with internal light, teeth like swords, eyes that held predatory intelligence. The beast's mind touched his. Intruder. Strange. Not food. Test. Before Arthur could respond, the creature lunged with shocking speed. Aquaman twisted aside, decades of combat experience guiding his movements even in alien waters. The trident of Poseidon came up instinctively, its tines blazing with golden energy as he deflected, a bite that would have sheared him in half. The leviathan circled, confused. Prey did not resist. Prey did not fight back. Am not your prey, Arthur projected forcefully, his telepathy adapting rapidly to these alien thought patterns. I am Aquaman, king of Atlantis. These waters accept me. The leviathan paused, massive head tilting. Then, impossibly, it bowed. King from far. Waters speak truth. You belong. Before Aquaman could process this, lights appeared above. Not bioluminescence, technology. A submersible craft descended through the water, sleek and organic in design, its hull resembling a manta ray. Through transparent viewports, Arthur saw them. Humanoid figures with salmon-colored skin, large eyes adapted for deep water, and expressions of absolute shock. The Mon Calamari research team had come to investigate seismic readings in the abyss. They had not expected to find a humanoid conversing with an osmier, one of Mon Cala's most dangerous, deep predators. Arthur watched the submersible carefully, trident ready but not threatening. The craft circled him slowly, scanning instruments flickering across its hull. He could feel the occupants' emotions through his expanding telepathic sense. Confusion, scientific curiosity, and a growing fear. They were broadcasting something, a communication signal he couldn't interpret. One of the Mon Calamari, distinguished by ornate bands around its arms, activated an external speaker. The sounds that emerged were melodic but utterly alien, nothing like any Earth language. Arthur frowned, reaching out telepathically instead. I mean no harm. I'm lost. Where am I? The Mon Calamari researcher jerked backward inside the craft, nearly dropping his datapad. The others began gesturing frantically at their instruments. Telepathy was not unheard. of in the galaxy. The Jedi possessed such abilities, but this was different. Raw, primal, connected, specifically to the ocean itself rather than the mystical force. The lead researcher, Captain Gile Velis, made a decision that would change Mon Cala's history. He keyed the external comm again, this time activating a translation protocol. The universal translator was imperfect, but it allowed basic communication. You speak to minds, to the Osmir. The mechanical translation made the words stilted, uncertain. Arthur nodded slowly, then projected his response telepathically while also speaking aloud, hoping the translator would capture both. I speak to all ocean life. It's what I am. I'm from a place called Earth, a world very far from here. I don't know how I arrived in your waters. Silence from the submersible. Then, you speak with the ocean's children. Our legends tell of such beings, but we believe them myth. You claim to be royalty. Am Arthur Curry, king of Atlantis. He gestured to the circling Osmir, which had taken up a protective position near him as if he were a pod member. Your creature recognizes me. Your waters accept me. I would know the name of this world and ask sanctuary until I understand what has happened. Captain Velis exchanged glances with his crew. The political situation on Mon Cala was volatile. Prince Lichar's claim to the throne was contested by Quarren separatists, and the Republic and Separatist alliance both circled like the predators of the deep. An outsider with impossible abilities appearing at this moment could be catastrophe or salvation. But the ancient laws of Mon Cala were clear. Those who speak with the ocean's voice are kin, regardless of origin. You are in the oceans of Mon Cala, in a galaxy far from any world called Earth. Velis replied carefully. These are complicated times. But if the Osmir accepts you, if the waters themselves embrace you, then perhaps the deep ones have sent you to us for a reason. He paused. I am Captain Gile Velis of the Mon Calamari Science Directorate. In the name of King Yos Kalina, may the currents keep him, and Prince Lichar his heir. I offer you sanctuary and audience with our leadership. Aquaman felt the weight of destiny settling over him like the pressure of the deep. He'd been a king long enough to recognize a political situation when he heard one. Contested succession. Complicated times. Formal diplomatic language hiding immense tension. He'd left one world's political struggles only to surface in another's. But he was also a man of honor. And these people had offered him shelter when they could have attacked or fled. I accept your sanctuary, Captain Velis. Take me to your leaders. I would understand this world before I decide what role, if any, I play in its future. As the submersible turned toward the distant lights of Mon Cala City, the Osmir followed unbidden, a living declaration that something unprecedented had entered the galaxy's most strategic ocean world. Above them, the twin moons of Mon Cala continued their eternal dance, unaware that the Clone Wars had just gained a player no strategist had anticipated. In the depths, ancient force vergences stirred. The ocean had spoken. A king had arrived. And on Coruscant, in the Jedi Temple, Master Yoda paused mid-meditation, webbed ears twitching as he sensed a disturbance, not in the Force itself, but in something parallel to it, something wild and ancient that the Force recognized as kin, yet fundamentally different. Interesting, the ancient Jedi murmured. A ripple in the ocean of the Force, there is. But from what stone was it cast? If you want to see more characters, enter the Star Wars galaxy. Hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The submersible descended deeper into civilized waters, and Arthur Curry prepared to meet a world that would test everything he believed about kingship, duty, and the price of intervention in wars not his own. Mon Cala City rose from the ocean floor like a dream carved from coral and steel. Massive bioluminescent towers spiraled upward through the water, their architecture blending organic growth with sophisticated technology in ways that made Arthur's breath catch. Thousands of Mon Calamari and Quarren moved through the currents, some in individual aquatic suits, others swimming freely through specialized residential zones. Transport vessels glided along established current lanes, their designs more elegant than any submarine Arthur had seen on Earth. But beneath the beauty, he sensed tension. His telepathic awareness had expanded exponentially since arriving in these alien waters, and the emotional undercurrents of the city crashed against him like storm. Waves, fear, resentment, divided loyalty. The city was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Captain Velas's submersible approached the royal palace, a magnificent structure of white, coral, and azure crystal that dominated the city's heart. Mon Calamari guards in ceremonial armor flanked the entrance. Their weapons, some kind of blaster. Technology adapted for underwater use, tracking the approaching vessel with professional wariness. The Osmir that had followed them maintained its distance, circling the palace perimeter as if standing vigil. The royal guard will want to scan you for weapons, Velas explained through the translator as they docked. Your trident. They may ask you to surrender it. Arthur's grip on the trident of Poseidon tightened reflexively. That's not happening. This weapon is part of who I am. It cannot be separated from me, and I wouldn't surrender it if it could. Velas's large eyes blinked in what Arthur was learning to recognize as Mon Calamari concern. Then we may have difficulties. The royal guard takes their duties seriously, especially now with, he stopped himself. Prince Lichar is young. His father, King Yos Kalina, passed recently. There are those who question whether the prince is ready to rule. A succession crisis. Arthur knew that dance all too well. Let me speak with your prince. King to future king. I'll respect his authority in his own palace. The airlock cycled, and Arthur emerged into a receiving chamber that somehow maintained both water and air in separate sections through technology. He didn't understand. A delegation waited. Mon Calamari in ornate robes bearing the symbols of government. Royal guards with weapons primed. And, most striking, a cluster of Quarren whose body language screamed hostility. Quarren were similar to Mon Calamari, but distinctly different. Squid-like facial tentacles, darker coloring, and eyes that held calculating intelligence. Arthur's telepathic sense detected their emotions immediately: suspicion, anger, and a carefully controlled aggression. These were not allies of whoever had granted him sanctuary. At the center of the delegation stood a young Mon Calamari, who could only be Prince Lichar, barely into adulthood by Arthur's estimate, wearing ceremonial armor that seemed slightly too large for his frame. The prince held himself with a dignity that reminded Arthur painfully of his own younger self, trying desperately to project authority. He didn't quite feel yet. I am Prince Lichar, heir to the throne of Mon Cala and defender of our people, the prince announced, his voice steady despite his youth. Captain Velas reports that you emerged from the desolate abyss, speaking with the voice of the ocean itself, that you command the Osmir as if they were your subjects, that you claim kingship from a world none of our star charts have recorded. Arthur stepped forward, moving with the fluid confidence of a man who had ruled beneath Earth's oceans for years. He kept the trident of Poseidon visible but non-threatening, its golden surface catching the bioluminescent light. I am Arthur Curry, King of Atlantis. I didn't ask to come to your world, Prince Lichar. I was brought here by forces I don't yet understand. But I recognize the look in your eyes. You're carrying weight you're not sure you're ready for. I know that burden. I've lived it. One of the Quarren stepped forward aggressively, a bulky figure whose tentacles writhed with barely contained emotion. You claim to understand our prince? You appear from nowhere, refuse to surrender your weapon, and expect us to simply accept your presence? For all we know, you're a Republic trick or a separatist weapon. Counselor Nasser Lichar said quietly. Our guest has broken no laws, and Captain Velas vouches for. Your father would have had this stranger contained until we understood the threat. Nasser interrupted, his voice sharp. But you are not your father, are you, Prince? You are a child playing at rulership while our world burns. The chamber erupted in argument. Mon Calamari officials shouting at Quarren representatives. Royal guards moving to defensive positions. Lichar trying to restore order while clearly struggling with the disrespect. Arthur watched it all with the practiced eye of someone who had navigated Atlantis's treacherous political waters for years. This wasn't just about him. This was a wound that had been festering long before he arrived. Arthur slammed the butt of his trident against the floor. The resulting shockwave was minor, just enough to create a resonant tone that cut through the chaos, without threatening anyone. Every eye turned to him. I've ruled long enough to recognize what's happening here, Arthur said quietly, his voice carrying authority that had nothing to do with volume. This isn't about whether I'm a threat. This is about whether your prince has the strength to lead. You're testing him through me. He turned to Nasser Ree. You want to see if he'll fold under pressure. If he'll let outsiders dictate terms. If he's weak. Nasser Ree's tentacles stilled. You presume much, stranger. I know much, Arthur countered. Because I've been where he is. Young. Untested. Half my kingdom thinking. I was too inexperienced, too different. Too other to rule effectively. He gestured to Lichar. But here's what I learned. Being a good king isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to make hard decisions when there are no good options. Lichar straightened, something flickering in his large eyes. You truly are a king, aren't you? Not just in title. In every way that matters, Arthur confirmed. Which is why I'm going to respect your authority here, Prince Lichar. You want me to submit to scanning? I'll allow it, though I warn you my physiology might confuse your instruments. You want the trident examined? I'll demonstrate it's not a threat, but I won't surrender it. You want to understand why I'm here? That makes two of us. He paused. But I'll offer you something your council seems reluctant to give. The benefit of the doubt. You invited me here in good faith. I'll return that courtesy until you give me reason not to. The chamber had gone silent. Lichar studied Arthur with an intensity that belied his youth, then nodded slowly. Captain Velis, arrange quarters for our guest in the diplomatic wing. Counselor Nasser Ree, your concerns are noted, but King Arthur has shown more respect for this throne in 5 minutes than some have shown in months. His voice gained strength. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss the situation. Until then, our guest is under royal protection. Anyone who threatens him threatens the crown itself. It was a small victory, but Arthur recognized its significance. The young prince had just drawn a line in the sand. Nasser Ree's expression was unreadable as he bowed stiffly. As you command, Prince Lichar, though I wonder if your father would approve of sheltering unknowns in these dangerous times. My father taught me that the ocean reveals its secrets to those patient enough to listen. Lichar replied. Perhaps that lesson applies here. As the delegation dispersed, Arthur caught the prince's eye and offered a slight nod of respect, one ruler to another. Lichar returned it with visible relief. But as royal guards escorted Arthur to his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into a political situation, far more complex than a simple succession dispute. Through the palace's transparent walls, he could see Mon Calamari and Corin moving through the city in separate currents, like two schools of fish that refused to swim together. Unity. That's what this world needed. Arthur had spent years trying to bridge the gap between Atlantis and the surface world. Here, the divisions were between species sharing the same ocean. What have I gotten myself into? In the shadows of the palace's lower levels, a cloaked figure observed the newcomer through a remote view screen. The hologram flickered, then resolved into the elegant, bearded face of Count Dooku. So, the Sith Lord murmured, Mon Cala has found itself a wild card. How inconvenient. His eyes gleamed with dark calculation. Or perhaps, opportune. Commander Tamsin, continue monitoring this King Arthur. If he proves troublesome to our plans, eliminate him. If he proves useful, a cold smile. Well, the Separatist Alliance welcomes all who share our vision of freedom from Republic tyranny. The hologram winked out, leaving only the cold waters of Mon Cala's deep and the gathering storm of war that would soon test everything Arthur believed about intervention, duty, and the cost of wearing a crown far from home. Arthur's quarters were luxurious by any standard, a sprawling chamber carved from living coral that grew in elegant spirals, bioluminescent plants providing soft light that shifted through blues and greens like Earth's aurora. Transparent walls offered a panoramic view of Mon Cala City's nighttime splendor. Thousands of lights twinkling in the dark waters like an underwater constellation. But luxury couldn't distract him from the weight of the situation, pressing down like deep ocean pressure. He stood at the viewport, trident of Poseidon resting against his shoulder, and reached out with his telepathy. The city's marine life responded. Immediately, a chorus of consciousness, more complex than anything Earth's oceans had offered. Schools of fish moving in precise formations. Aquatic mammals with near-human intelligence patrolling specific territories. Deeper predators that regarded the city with patient hunger. And beneath it all, that strange awareness he'd felt in the desolate abyss, as if Mon Cala's oceans themselves possessed a form of sentience. This world is alive in ways Earth never was, Arthur thought. But it's also dying. I can feel the division like a disease in the water. A chime at the entrance interrupted his meditation. Arthur turned as a young Mon Calamari in simple robes entered, carrying a datapad and moving with the nervous energy of someone on an important mission. King Arthur, the visitor said through a translation device. I am Mina Tills, diplomatic attaché to Prince Lichar. The prince requests a private audience, if you're willing, away from the council's ears. Arthur's instincts flared. Private meetings between rulers often meant either conspiracy or genuine trust. Lead the way. They moved through the palace's service corridors, avoiding the main halls where counselors and guards maintained their vigilant patrols. Mina led him to a small observation deck that jutted from the palace's southern wall, a place where the city lights faded and the wild ocean pressed close. Prince Lichar waited there alone, his ceremonial armor exchanged for simple clothing that made him look even younger than before. Thank you for coming, Lichar said as Mina departed, leaving them in privacy. I needed to speak with you. Without Nasser Ree's posturing or the council's politics getting in the way, Arthur leaned against the railing, studying the young prince. You handled yourself well today, better than I did at my first major council meeting. I nearly started a war with the surface world because I couldn't control my temper. Lichar managed a weak smile. I wanted to order Nasser rearrested for insubordination, but that would prove his point, wouldn't it? That I'm too young, too impulsive, too much like. He trailed off. Too much like a young king trying to find his footing, Arthur finished. Lichar, what's really happening here? This isn't just about Quarren wanting more representation or political disagreements. There's something deeper tearing your people apart. The prince was silent for a long moment, staring out into the dark waters. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. The Quarren have always felt like second-class citizens in Cala City. My father tried to bridge that gap, gave them equal representation, shared resources. But the Republic's war with the Separatists has weaponized old grudges. The Separatists whisper to the Quarren. The Mon Calamari serve the Republic. They value Republic interests over Quarren needs. Wouldn't you be better off independent? And Nasser Ree is one of those listening, Arthur guessed. He leads the Quarren Isolation League. They haven't openly joined the Separatists yet. But Lichar's fists clenched. My father died 3 months ago. Natural causes, they say. But the timing, right when the Separatists are pushing hardest for Mon Cala's defection, it's too convenient. I can't prove anything, but I feel it in the currents. Something is wrong. Arthur's expression darkened. He'd dealt with political assassination before. Atlantis had its share of throne seekers willing to spill royal blood. You think the Separatists had your father killed to destabilize Mon Cala during succession? I think someone wants Mon Cala weak and divided when the Real push comes. Lichar said quietly. Our shipyards produce some of the galaxy's finest vessels. Whoever controls Mon Cala controls a significant portion of naval production. The Republic needs us. The Separatists need us. And I'm caught in the middle, trying to hold together a kingdom that's splitting at the seams. The young prince turned to face Arthur fully, and in his eyes was a desperation that transcended species or galaxies. You said you understand the burden of wearing a crown, that you've been where I am. So tell me, King Arthur, how do I unite my people when half of them don't believe I should be king at all? Arthur was quiet, weighing his words carefully. He'd come to Mon Cala by accident, thrust into a political situation he barely understood in a galaxy whose rules he was still learning. Every instinct screamed at him to stay neutral, to find a way home without getting entangled in alien wars. He'd made that mistake before on Earth, intervening in conflicts that weren't his, only to discover the situation was more complicated than it appeared. But he was also a king, and he recognized in Lichar the same struggle he'd faced when Atlantis's throne had fallen to him. The crushing weight of duty, the isolation of leadership, and the terrible question of whether you were strong enough to bear it. You don't unite them by being perfect, Arthur said finally. You unite them by being present, by listening to both Mon Calamari and Quarren grievances, really listening, not just performing for political points, by making decisions that serve Mon Cala as a whole, even when it costs you personally. He paused. And sometimes, You unite them by giving them something bigger than their divisions to focus on. Like what? The war. Like justice. Like protecting the innocent. Like proving that a king's job isn't to favor one group over another. It's to ensure everyone can thrive. Arthur gestured toward the city. Your father gave the Quarren equal representation. That's a start, but representation without real power is just theater. What do the Quarren want that they don't have? Lichar considered this. They want control over their own districts. They want Quarren-specific industries protected from Mon Calamari competition. He stopped. They want to feel like Mon Cala is theirs too. Not just a Mon Calamari kingdom that tolerates Quarren presence. Then give them that, Arthur said simply. Not because the separatists are whispering, and not because you're trying to buy loyalty. Because it's right. Because a kingdom divided against itself will fall to external enemies every time. But if I give too much, the Mon Calamari Council will say I'm weak. That I'm letting Quarren separatists dictate terms. Then you make it clear you're not giving them anything, you're recognizing what was always theirs by right. Arthur's voice gained intensity. Leadership isn't about appearing strong, Lichar. It's about being strong enough to do what's right even when it makes you look weak. Trust me, I've learned that lesson the hard way. Before Lichar could respond, an alarm shrieked through the water, a deep, resonant tone that made every Mon Calamari and Quarren in the city freeze. Arthur's telepathy exploded, with panic from thousands of marine minds simultaneously. What is that? Arthur demanded. Lichar's face had gone pale. Depth charge warning. Something's attacking the outer districts. He was already moving, grabbing a communicator from his belt. Royal Guard, report. What's happening? The response came through crackling with static and the sound of explosions. Attack on the Quarren industrial sector. Multiple hostile signatures. They're not Republic or Separatist. There, the transmission dissolved into screaming and weapon fire. Arthur didn't wait for permission. He dove through the observation deck's emergency exit, the trident of Poseidon blazing, to life in his hand as his Atlantean physiology propelled him through the water with superhuman speed. Behind him, Lichar shouted something about waiting for guards. But Arthur was already gone. The Quarren district was 3 kilometers away. Arthur covered the distance in less than a minute, his enhanced swimming speed creating a visible wake as he rocketed through Mon Cala's currents. What he found when he arrived made his blood run cold. Massive, mechanical constructs, aquatic droids of some kind, were systematically destroying Quarren homes and businesses. But these weren't the sleek designs he'd seen in Mon Cala City. These were brutal, utilitarian war machines, shark-like forms bristling with weapons, firing explosive projectiles that vaporized coral and flesh with equal efficiency. Quarren civilians fled in terror while a handful of local security forces tried desperately to mount a defense. And there, coordinating the attack from a command submersible, was a figure Arthur's instincts immediately marked as dangerous, a massive, armored Carcharodon, a shark-like humanoid, whose smile revealed rows of serrated teeth. The creature's movements spoke of predatory confidence and casual cruelty. Arthur didn't announce himself. He simply acted. The trident of Poseidon channeled energy that made the water around it boil as Arthur slammed into the nearest aqua droid with the force of a torpedo. The impact crushed the machine's central processing unit, and the droid went dark, sinking toward the ocean floor in pieces. Arthur spun, hurling the trident like a javelin through 2 more droids before it returned to his hand with mystical certainty. The attacking force, 15 droids, total, immediately redirected their attention to this new threat. Well, the Carcharodon commander said through an external speaker. His basic translated perfectly. What have we here? The mysterious stranger who's been causing such a stir in the palace. King Arthur of Nowhere. Come to play hero. Arthur's eyes narrowed. I don't know who you are or what you're trying to accomplish, but attacking civilians is where I draw the line. Stand down, or I'll put you down. The Carcharodon's laughter was like grinding metal. I am Commander Riff Tamsin, and I'm accomplishing exactly what I intend, demonstrating to the Quarren people that they're Mon Calamari. Protectors cannot save them. That their precious prince, Lichar, is too weak to defend his own kingdom. His smile widened. The Separatist Alliance offers strength. We offer protection. We offer. Arthur didn't let him finish. He launched himself at the command submersible, trident blazing with power that Earth's oceans had never witnessed, but that Cala's force-touched waters amplified. Beyond expectation, the energy blast punched through the submersibles, shields like they were tissue paper. "I offer you one more chance to surrender," Arthur growled as Tamsin's vessel listed. Emergency system screaming. "Take it." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in the Carcharodon's black eyes. This wasn't part of the plan. This stranger moved with a speed that rivaled Jedi, hit with a force that matched combat droids, and wielded a weapon that clearly operated on principles outside Republic or Separatist technology. "Open fire," Tamsin ordered his remaining droids. "Kill him." The water erupted in weapons, fire, and explosions. And in the chaos, Arthur Curry discovered exactly how far he was willing to go to protect innocent lives, even in a galaxy that wasn't his own. The Aqua droids converged with mechanical precision, their targeting systems painting Arthur with a dozen kill locks simultaneously. Tamsin's command vessel retreated behind the formation, the Carcharodon commander watching with predatory interest as explosive bolts and plasma torpedoes saturated the water where Arthur floated. But the king of Atlantis was no longer there. Arthur moved through the water like liquid lightning, his Atlantean physiology rendering him faster than anything the droids' processors could track. He twisted between incoming fire, the trident of Poseidon deflecting energy blasts with contemptuous ease. Where Earth's oceans had made him merely superhuman, Cala's deeper, more force-saturated waters amplified his abilities to levels that bordered on supernatural. He could feel every current, sense every pressure differential, perceive the attack patterns before they formed. The first droid died as Arthur's trident punched clean through its power core. The second and third fell to a sweeping strike that cleaved their optical sensors and exposed their vulnerable circuitry to the corrosive seawater. Arthur spun, channeling energy through the trident that sent a shockwave rippling outward. For more droids crumpled like crushed cans, their internal systems overloaded by the mystical pulse. "Impossible," Tamsin breathed, watching his tactical advantage evaporate in seconds. "What are you?" Arthur didn't answer with words. He reached out with his telepathy, that ancient gift that had made him king of Earth's oceans, and called to Cala's apex predators. The response was immediate and overwhelming. From the depths beyond the city's lights, they came. Osmir, the same massive leviathans that had first encountered Arthur in the desolate abyss, rose like living nightmares. Their crystalline scales reflected the explosion's light as they descended upon the remaining droids with primal fury. One Osmir seized a droid in jaws that could bite through starship hull plating, crushing it into scrap metal. Another swept 3 droids away, with a tail strike that sent them tumbling into the abyss below. The Quarren civilians who had been fleeing stopped, staring in disbelief as the ocean itself seemed to rise in defense of their district. Children clutched their parents, pointing at the alien warrior who commanded. Monsters like a conductor directing a symphony of destruction. Tamsin's confidence shattered like his droids. "Retreat. All units, fall back to." "You're not going anywhere," Arthur said. And suddenly he was there, crossing 50 meters in a heartbeat, to appear directly in front of Tamsin's damaged submersible. The trident's tines pressed against the viewport, energy crackling along its length like contained lightning. "You came here to terrorize civilians, to manipulate a political situation through violence. Where I come from, we have a word for people like you, tyrant." Through the transparent steel, Tamsin's eyes blazed with hatred and grudging respect. "You have no idea what forces you're interfering with, surface dweller. The Separatist Alliance will what? Send more droids? More commanders who think civilians are acceptable targets." Arthur's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. "I've fought wars, real wars, against enemies who actually threaten my people. What you're doing here isn't war, it's terrorism. And I don't tolerate terrorists in my waters." "These aren't your waters," Tamsin snarled. "They are now," Arthur replied simply. "Because someone needs to protect them. And your prince is too young and too constrained by politics to do what needs to be done. So I'm making it simple for you, Commander Tamsin. Leave Cala. Tell your separatist masters that this world is under my protection. Come back, and I'll show you what real power looks like." For a moment, Tamsin seemed to consider calling Arthur's bluff, ordering his submersible to ram the stranger, perhaps triggering some hidden weapon. But the Osmiers circling the vessel like sharks, the scattered remains of 15 combat droids, and the absolute certainty in Arthur's eyes convinced him otherwise. "This isn't over," Tamsin hissed. "Count Dooku will hear of this. The Separatist Alliance does not forget." "Good," Arthur interrupted. "Make sure your Count understands that Mon Cala isn't some undefended prize, waiting to be claimed. Now get out of my sight before I change my mind about letting you leave." Tamsin's submersible fired emergency thrusters, fleeing into the darkness beyond the city's perimeter. The Osmier made as if to pursue, but Arthur sent a telepathic command. "Let him go. Let him carry the message." The great Leviathans circled once more, then descended back into the depths, their task complete. Silence fell over the Quarren district, or as close to silence as a living ocean could achieve. Then, slowly, the civilians began to emerge from their shelters. Quarren security forces approached cautiously, weapons lowered but ready, unsure whether to treat Arthur as savior or threat. An elderly Quarren female, her facial tentacles gray with age, swam forward with surprising courage. "You saved us. Why? You're Mon Calamari's guest, not ours." "I'm nobody's guest," Arthur corrected gently. "And I didn't save you because of politics or species. I saved you because attacking civilians is wrong. No matter who's doing it or what justification they claim." He gestured to the damaged homes and businesses. "This shouldn't have happened. Not here. Not anywhere. But it did happen." "Another," Quarren said bitterly, a younger male whose home smoldered behind him. "It happened because Prince Lichar can't protect us. Because the Mon Calamari Council cares more about Republic politics than Quarren lives." Tamsin was right about one thing. We're expendable to them. Before Arthur could respond, the water shimmered with the arrival of royal guards, 2 full squads surrounding Prince Lichar, who looked equal parts relieved and terrified. The young prince took in the destruction, the scattered droid remains, the Osmiers still visible in the distant waters, and finally Arthur standing amid Quarren civilians like some mythic guardian from ancient legends. "King Arthur," Lichar said carefully, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd through amplification technology. "What happened here?" "Your world happened," Arthur replied, making no effort to soften his words. "Someone, that Carcharodon called himself Commander Tamsin, attacked this district with military-grade droids. He said he was demonstrating separatist strength, but what he was really doing was trying to prove you couldn't protect your own people." Lichar's face tightened. "Riff Tamsin, the Separatists' aquatic warfare specialist. We've had intelligence suggesting he was operating near Mon Cala, but this is the first confirmed attack." He turned to the Quarren civilians. "I swear to you, we will find those responsible and you'll do nothing." The elderly Quarren interrupted, her voice sharp. "Just like you did nothing when Quarren workers were laid off from the shipyards. Just like you did nothing when Mon Calamari merchants raised prices in our districts. Just like you've done nothing but make promises since your father died." The accusation hung in the water like poison. Lichar looked as if he'd been physically struck, his young face struggling between anger and shame. Around him, the royal guards tensed, hands moving toward weapons. "Stand down," Arthur said quietly, but with enough authority that even the Mon Calamari guards hesitated. He turned to the elderly Quarren. "You're angry. You have every right to be. But directing that anger at Lichar won't rebuild your homes or bring back the lives lost tonight. He's not your enemy. The people who sent those droids are. He's not our protector either." The bitter young Quarren shot back. "You are. A complete stranger did more for us in 5 minutes than the royal palace has done in months." "That's not fair," Lichar protested. "The council has been working on security protocols. We've increased patrols." "Then where were those patrols tonight?" Another Quarren demanded. "Where were your royal guards when droids were destroying our homes?" Arthur could see Lichar drowning in the accusations, could see the young prince's confidence crumbling under the weight of legitimate grievances he had no immediate answers for. It reminded Arthur painfully of his own early years as king, when Atlantis had tested him at every turn, when every decision felt like a potential catastrophe, when the throne felt less like a seat of power and more like a target painted on his back. But Arthur had learned something crucial during those years. Sometimes, a king's greatest strength wasn't having all the answers. It was having the courage to admit when he was wrong. Your prince can't be everywhere at once, Arthur said, addressing the crowd. No ruler can. But he showed up tonight as fast as his guards could bring him. He's standing here, listening to your anger instead of hiding behind palace walls. That takes courage. He glanced at Lichar. And if he's smart, he'll use this moment not to make more promises, but to make actual changes. Lichar stared at Arthur for a long moment, then seemed to draw strength from somewhere deep inside himself. He turned to his head of security, a scarred, Mon Calamari officer named Captain Akbar. Jail Akbar, effective immediately. I want Quarren security forces integrated into the Royal Guard structure, not as auxiliaries, as equals with full authority. This district and all core majority areas will have local commanders who answer to their communities first and the palace second. Akbar's expression was unreadable. Your Highness, the council will never approve such a radical. I'm not asking the council for permission, Lichar interrupted, his voice gaining strength with each word. I'm exercising my authority as crown prince and heir to Mon Cala's throne. If the council wants to challenge me, they can do so formally. Until then, this is my command. Silence. Then, slowly, the elderly Quarren who had challenged Lichar nodded. It's a start, Prince. Only a start. But it's more than your father ever offered. Then help me do better, Lichar said simply. Not as Mon Calamari or Quarren, but as people of Mon Cala. Because Tamsin was right about one thing. Divided, we're vulnerable. United, we're unstoppable. Arthur felt a surge of respect for the young prince. It wasn't a perfect solution, politics never offered those, but it was genuine. Leadership under pressure. Lichar was learning the same lesson Arthur had learned. Sometimes you had to make bold moves that everyone criticized in order to create real change. But as the crowd began to disperse and cleanup crews arrived to assess the damage, Arthur's telepathy caught something that made his blood run cold. A presence in the distant waters, watching them. Not Tamsin. This was something different. Something that felt wrong on a fundamental level. Like a predator wearing prey's clothing. And in the darkness beyond Mon Cala City, on a cloaked separatist vessel, Count Dooku reviewed the footage of Arthur's battle with clinical interest. Fascinating, the Sith Lord murmured. He fights with the ferocity of a beast and the precision of a Jedi. Yet the Force barely touches him. His power comes from elsewhere, something primal and ancient. Dooku's elegant fingers steepled thoughtfully. General Grievous, what is your assessment? The cyborg general's mechanical voice rasped through the holographic connection. He is dangerous, but mortal. Overwhelming force would eliminate him. Perhaps, Dooku conceded. But why eliminate a useful piece when you can turn it to your advantage? This, King Arthur, clearly opposes injustice. He protects the weak. He challenges authority. A cold smile. All admirable qualities that we can redirect. If he believes the Republic is the greater threat to Mon Cala's people, he might become our greatest asset. Dooku's holocommunicator chimed with an incoming transmission. The hologram of a cloaked figure appeared, features hidden, but the presence unmistakable to anyone who knew the true nature of the Sith. Master, Dooku said, bowing. You've seen the reports. I have, Darth Sidious replied, his voice like silk over steel. This outsider complicates our plans for Mon Cala. But complications can become opportunities, Lord Tyrannus. Make contact with their Quarren separatists. Feed their resentment. And when the time is right, the Emperor's eyes gleamed from within his hood. We'll see whether this king bends to the dark side or breaks against it. The transmission ended, leaving Dooku alone with his thoughts and the weight of his master's expectations. On Mon Cala, Arthur Curry helped Quarren families salvage what remained of their homes, unaware that he'd just become a piece in a game that had been playing out for 1,000 years. A game where kings were pawns, and the only winners were those willing to sacrifice everything, including their souls, for power. But Arthur had faced darkness before, and he'd learned long ago that some things were worth fighting for, even if the fight cost him everything. The question was whether Mon Cala would let him fight for it, or whether politics and ancient hatreds would tear the world apart before he could make a difference. The aftermath of Tamsin's Attacks stretched across 3 days of political chaos that made Arthur long for the simple clarity of ocean combat. Lechar's integration. Order had sparked exactly the firestorm the young prince had anticipated. The Mon Calamari Council split between those who supported bold action and those who viewed it as capitulation to terrorism. Nasser Ri and the Quarren Isolation League, rather than celebrating the gesture, accused Lechar of making cosmetic changes to distract from systemic failures. Arthur watched it all from the margins, increasingly frustrated by the realization that his intervention had solved nothing. He'd stopped one attack. He'd protected civilians. But the underlying disease eating at Mon Cala remained untouched, festering in the dark waters of resentment and political maneuvering. On the third night, Mina Tills found him in the palace's deepest meditation chamber, a spherical room of pure, transparent steel that offered unobstructed views into the abyss below. Arthur floated in the center, trident across his lap, communing with the ocean's consciousness in ways the Mon Calamari could only theorize about. The council is demanding your presence, Mina said without preamble. Nasser Ri has convinced enough members to call for a formal inquiry into your actions. They're claiming you acted without authorization, endangered Mon Cala's neutrality, and violated sovereign airspace, or water space. She grimaced at the awkward translation. Arthur didn't open his eyes. And what does Lechar think? The prince is fighting to protect you, but he's outnumbered. Mina's voice carried genuine concern. Nasser Ri is using this to challenge Lechar's authority directly. If the council votes no confidence in the prince's judgment, they can delay his coronation indefinitely. Some are even calling for a Quarren co-regency until Lechar matures. Now Arthur's eyes opened, glowing faintly in the dim chamber. They're using me as a weapon against him. Everything I did to help is being twisted into proof he's unfit to rule. Politics is a different kind of ocean, Mina said quietly. One where the currents move in directions that have nothing to do with justice or right action. Arthur rose, the trident of Poseidon blazing to life as frustration coursed through him. I saved lives. I stopped a terrorist attack, and their response is to hold a trial. Welcome to democracy, Mina replied with bitter irony. We're doing the right thing matters less than whether you had permission to do it. The council chamber was packed when Arthur arrived, Mon Calamari and Quarren, representatives filling every available space. Their combined emotional energy, creating a telepathic roar that nearly overwhelmed Arthur's senses. Anger, fear, ambition, resentment, hope, despair, all of it crashing together in a maelstrom that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the civilization, tearing itself apart. Prince Lechar sat in the throne that was his by birth, but not yet by coronation, looking simultaneously regal and vulnerable. Captain Akbar stood at his right hand, the veteran officer's expression carved from stone. And opposite them, Nasser Ri held court among the Quarren delegation like a rival monarch preparing to claim his prize. King Arthur of Atlantis, Nasser Ri announced formally, his voice amplified through the chamber's acoustic design. You stand before the ruling council of Mon Cala to answer for your unsanctioned military action against separatist forces. Do you deny that you engaged in combat without authorization from this council or Prince Lechar? Arthur met the Quarren's gaze evenly. I don't deny defending civilians from a terrorist attack. That is not what I asked, Nasser Ri pressed. Did you or did you not take military action without proper authority? I took action that saved lives, Arthur replied. If that's a crime here, then your laws need examining. Murmurs rippled through the council. One Mon Calamari representative, an elder statesman named Senator Tills, whom Arthur recognized as Mina's father, raised a webbed hand. King Arthur, we appreciate your enthusiasm for justice, but Mon Cala operates under specific protocols designed to maintain our neutrality. In the galactic conflict, unsanctioned military action, regardless of intent, jeopardizes our position with both the Republic and the Separatist Alliance. Neutrality. Arthur's voice carried disbelief. Commander Tamsin wasn't maintaining neutrality when he attacked the Quarren district. He was testing your defenses and exploiting your divisions. And based on this council's response, I'd say his assessment was accurate. You're more concerned with protocol than protection. You dare, one counselor began. But Lichar's voice cut through the rising tumult. He dares to speak truth. The young prince stood, and for the first time since Arthur had met him, Lichar's voice carried the full authority of his bloodline. This council has spent 3 days arguing about jurisdiction and authorization, while ignoring the fundamental question: why were Quarren civilians vulnerable to attack in the first place? Where were our patrols? Where were our early warning systems? Where was the unity we claimed to represent? Your Highness, Nasser Rees said with dangerous calm, your youth shows in your inability to separate emotional reaction from political necessity. King Arthur's actions, however well-intentioned, have consequences. The separatists now have justification to claim Cala violated neutrality by harboring a combatant. They could use this as pretext for full invasion. They were going to invade anyway. Arthur interjected. Tamsin's attack wasn't random, it was reconnaissance. He was measuring your response time, testing your defensive capabilities, and documenting your internal divisions. Whether I intervened or not, the separatists were already planning their next move. And you know this how? Nasser re-challenged. What military intelligence do you possess about separatist strategy? I know because I've fought enough wars to recognize the pattern. Arthur shot back. But here's what I don't know. Why is this council more interested in prosecuting someone who defended your people than in addressing the security failures that made the attack possible? The question hung in the water like an explosive charge waiting to detonate. Several councillors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Senator Tills cleared his throat diplomatically. The security review is ongoing. It's been ongoing since my father died, Lichar interrupted, his voice gaining strength with each word. We've had reviews and committees and subcommittees, all producing reports that gather dust while our people remain vulnerable. Councillor Nasser Ree, you've spent months undermining every security proposal I've made, claiming they infringe on Quarren autonomy. Yet when Quarren civilians were actually attacked, where was your isolation league? Where were your community defenders? Nasser Ree's tentacles writhed with barely contained rage. You dare suggest the Quarren Isolation League bears responsibility for? I dare suggest, Lichar said coldly, that everyone in this chamber bears responsibility. Mon Calamari for taking Quarren loyalty for granted. Quarren for allowing resentment to blind them to external threats. All of us for playing politics, while our world burns. He turned to face the full council. I called this session to address King Arthur's actions. Very well. Let me be clear. I authorized his intervention retroactively. As Crown Prince and acting sovereign, that is within my authority. That is not protocol. One councillor protested. Protocol is a luxury we no longer have, Lichar replied. Commander Tamsin will return with more forces, better tactics, and full separatist backing. When he does, we need to be united, not divided, not arguing about who had proper authorization to save lives. United. Arthur watched the young prince with renewed respect. This was the leader. Lichar could become someone willing to take controversial stands when the situation demanded it. But Arthur could also see the toll it was taking. The slight tremor in Lichar's hands, the way his gills flared with stress, the desperate hope in his eyes that someone would support him before his courage failed. Captain Akbar stepped forward, his scarred face grave. The prince speaks wisdom. I've served Mon Cala for 30 years, through prosperity and crisis. Never have I seen us so close to civil war, not from external invasion, but from internal collapse. If we cannot set aside our divisions long enough to defend our own civilians, then we deserve whatever fate the separatists have planned for us. Silence fell across the chamber. Then, slowly, Senator Tills nodded. The prince's retroactive authorization is irregular, but legally defensible. I move that we table the inquiry into King Arthur's actions and instead focus on the security failures. Councillor Nasser raised. If we're going to prosecute anyone, perhaps we should start with those responsible for leaving the Quarren district vulnerable. The implication was clear, and it landed like a depth charge in Nasser Ree's delegation. Several Quarren councillors who had been vocal supporters of the Isolation League suddenly found themselves under uncomfortable scrutiny. If the council investigated security failures, they'd discover that Nasser Ree's faction had systematically blocked defensive improvements in Quarren districts. apparently preferring vulnerability that could be blamed on Mon Calamari neglect. Nasser resaw the trap closing and made a desperate play. This council has no authority over me. The core in isolation. League answers to a higher power now, one that actually respects our sovereignty. He gestured dramatically toward the chamber's main viewport, where massive shapes were materializing from the darkness beyond the city. Separatist vessels, dozens of them, troop transports, assault craft, and at their center, a Providence-class dreadnought that dwarfed anything in Mon Cala's defensive fleet. The Separatist alliance offers the Koran people true independence. Nasser re-announced, his voice ringing with triumph and something darker, the desperation of someone who'd wagered everything on a single move. No more Mon Calamari dominance. No more Republic interference. Just freedom to determine our own future. The council erupted into chaos. Mon Calamari counselors shouting accusations of treason. Koran representatives torn between loyalty and grievance. Royal guards moving to defensive positions as klaxons wailed throughout the city. Arthur's telepathy exploded with panic. From millions of marine minds as Mon Cala citizens realized they were under invasion. But through the chaos, he felt something else, something that made his blood run cold. The Osmir and other deep predators he'd bonded with were fleeing the area in terror, driven away by something that registered to their primitive minds as absolute wrongness. Dark side presence, powerful and ancient, radiating from the dreadnought like pollution in clean water. Lichar, Arthur said urgently, moving to the young prince's side. That ship, there's something on it. That's not natural, not like your technology or even your force. It feels like corruption given form. Lichar's face was pale as he watched his world's defenses scramble to respond. Count Dooku. Intelligence suggested he might be in this sector. But we hoped. He cut himself off. It doesn't matter what we hoped. He's here. And if Nasser has made a deal with the Separatists, then this was always the plan. Arthur finished grimly. Destabilize your succession. Exploit Koran resentment. Engineer a crisis that forces you to choose between Koran autonomy and Mon Calamari control. And when you're weak and divided, invade with overwhelming force backed by Koran collaborators. Captain Akbar was already at the tactical console, reviewing defensive positions. We have 12 corvettes and 2 cruisers in immediate response range. Against a Providence-class dreadnought and its support fleet. We'll last 15 minutes, maybe 20. Then we evacuate, Lichar said, his voice hollow. Get civilians to the deep shelters and… No, Arthur interrupted. Both Lichar and Akbar turned to stare at him. Arthur's grip on the trident of Poseidon tightened, golden energy beginning to swirl around its length. You don't evacuate. You fight. Because if you retreat now, Nasser wins. The Separatists win. Mon Cala becomes a puppet state. And everything your father built dies with your surrender. I appreciate the sentiment, Akbar said dryly. But we're facing a military force that outguns us 5-1. Courage doesn't overcome that kind of disadvantage. Arthur's smile was grim and absolutely feral. You're thinking like surface dwellers, like people who fight in air and vacuum. But this is an ocean, and I am its king. He turned to Lichar, and in his eyes was the promise of something the young prince had never witnessed. A warrior at full power, unbound by politics or protocol, ready to unleash the primal fury that had made him legend in another universe. Give me authorization, real authorization this time. Let me show Count Dooku and his separatist alliance what happens when they threaten an ocean world under my protection. Lichar stared at Arthur for a long moment, weighing the decision that would define his entire reign. Then, with the courage that separated true leaders from mere politicians, he nodded. Captain Akbar, transmit on all frequencies. Mon Cala recognizes King Arthur of Atlantis as defender of the deep, authorized to engage hostile forces with full military authority. Lichar's voice strengthened. And to Count Dooku, if you're listening, you wanted to see how a young king responds to invasion? Watch and learn. Arthur didn't wait for further authorization. He dove through the council chamber's emergency exit and shot toward the separatist fleet like a golden comet, the trident of Poseidon blazing, with power that Mon Cala's force saturated. Oceans amplified beyond anything he'd experienced on Earth. Behind him, Lichar watched through the viewport as a single warrior charged an entire invasion fleet. Around him, the council, Mon Calamari and Corin alike, fell silent, united for the first time in months by the sheer audacity of what they were witnessing. "He's going to die," one counselor whispered. "Maybe," Captain Akbar replied. "Or maybe we're about to see why some beings earn the title of king." In the water between Mon Cala City and the separatist dreadnought, Arthur Curry reached deep into the ocean's consciousness and called to every predator, every force of nature, every primal power that Mon Cala's ancient waters contained. The response was immediate and catastrophic. From the desolate abyss, from trenches that hadn't been explored in millennia, from depths where light had never reached, they came. Leviathans that made the Osmir look like minnows. Ancient beings that had survived since Mon Cala's seas first formed. Creatures that registered to force-sensitive observers as virgences. Themselves, living concentrations of the ocean's raw power. And at their head, carrying a trident that blazed like a dying star, swam a king who had just declared war on tyranny itself. Count Dooku, watching from his dreadnought's bridge, felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: genuine uncertainty. "What is that?" his tactical officer demanded as sensors registered impossible readings. Dooku's force senses screamed warnings as he perceived. Arthur not through conventional means, but through the dark side's lens, and what he saw made even a Sith Lord pause. This wasn't a Force user. This was something else entirely. Something that existed parallel to the Force rather than within it. Power that answered to different laws, older laws. Laws that predated the Sith and Jedi both. "That," Dooku said quietly, "is why we should have negotiated." Then Arthur hit the dreadnoughts forward, shields with the force of a tectonic event. And the Battle of Mon Cala, the battle that would echo through Clone Wars history and reshape the galaxy's understanding of power itself, truly began.